Hello, my wonderful friends. I hope you're all having a lovely day today. Welcome back to our ProRevenge series, where many of you come to get your dose of revenge satisfaction, my friends. In this episode, you're going to hear 5 revenge stories. The first is how our poster was involved in getting revenge on a terrible co-worker who thought she was invincible. The second story is about our poster getting fired from a corporate job and bringing in better lawyers than the company had. And the third story is about a mother who wouldn't stop gossiping. Who knows one of those? My friends, I hope you stay for the stories today and do hit that subscribe button for future revenge stories. Let's dive in. Years ago, one of my best friends, whom we'll call Kate, was working for a business-to-business tech corporation on the West Coast. Kate had a co-worker in the same department named Angela. There are too many things for me to list that Angela did wrong, but here are a few notable examples. Angela would show up, without fail, 15 minutes late to every shift. Angela had been passed around 3 departments due to not being a good fit in the other ones. Angela would spend her entire shift on social media on her phone. Angela would regularly give people incorrect information on the phone. Angela would regularly paint her toenails while working. One of Angela's duties was to reply to an email inbox from contractors looking to renew warranties on their products. At one time, this inbox had over 670 unread emails in it, all of them from potential paying customers. Angela once had an inappropriate phone conversation with her boyfriend while she was working overtime. Angela would flirt with every single man who worked for the company, and Angela was also not very attractive, so many of these men would complain to HR. Angela was seen on multiple occasions being overly affectionate with employees in the parking lot. Angela would also skip out on doing work all week, causing her to need to stay and collect overtime pay, wherein she would continue to skip out on doing her work. Kate finally reported her after the inappropriate phone incident, which led to a meeting between Angela, the HR director, Kate's supervisor Kim, and the department VP. Angela was not fired but was pressured to resign and declined. Their direct supervisor Kim was onto Angela's game though and would watch her much more closely. So, in the following months, Angela vowed revenge and spent weeks trying to figure out who had reported her. Angela was a large, tall woman who was physically intimidating and somehow bullied one of the co-workers into revealing that Kate was the snitch. Angela spent the next week making Kate's life miserable, verbally harassing her, and being overall nasty whenever she saw Kate. She also gossiped and started rumors behind her back. It reached a breaking point when Angela shoved Kate while passing her in the hallway one day. HR was notified, and once again Angela somehow made it off scot-free. Knowing that Angela was somehow untouchable by HR, many of Kate's co-workers began ostracizing Kate, fearing that Angela would target them as well, and nobody would corroborate Kate's reports of Angela starting rumors or harassing her. Kate quickly went from loving her job to hating it, and became depressed during this time. It was at this time that I decided I would get revenge. Angela had won pretty handily. Knowing that Kim had no authority because HR wouldn't touch her, Angela went back to not doing any work. She even got engaged and bragged to everyone at the office about her extravagant destination wedding plans. About a month later, Kate unexpectedly received a text from one of her coworkers. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation with the department VP. The VP had revealed that he had been having an affair with Angela, and this message had made its way around the gossip chain back to Kate. Her invincibility to HR suddenly made a lot more sense. I knew I was eventually going to expose her affair to her fiancé, but decided to wait on it. The day of reckoning came about 2 weeks before the big wedding day. On Friday after work, I made a throwaway Facebook account and sent all the proof I had to her fiancé. He didn't reply, but I could see that he had seen it at 6 in the evening. The wedding plans were cancelled on Facebook that Sunday. Monday rolled around, and Angela came in about 15 minutes late and immediately demanded to speak to HR. A 4-way meeting took place between Angela, Kim, the HR director, and the department VP, the one she was having an affair with. 10 minutes went by, and Kim and the HR director both left. 5 minutes later, Angela left the office, followed shortly by the department VP. They both returned to their own workspaces. Angela began working, and 15 minutes later, the department VP arrived with Kim and security and told Angela to pack her things up and turn in her badge. Angela was then escorted out of the building, and she protested to the VP the entire way out. He only said 2 words to her: "You're replaceable." I didn't find out how this happened until months later, but Kim eventually revealed what transpired to Kate. Angela had racked up tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt paying for her wedding, and now that her engagement was off, she tried to use her affair with the department VP to blackmail her way into a pay raise. She had told them that she had received offers from other companies that would pay her much more, which was a lie, and that she'd leave if they didn't give her a significant raise. When Kim and the HR director left the room, the department VP told Angela that if they got it in writing that she would quit and give her 2-week notice, he could convince them to give her a raise. He also reassured her that she could take it back during her 2-week notice and maintain her position. Angela took the bait, and the VP immediately took this formal written notice of resignation to HR. Kim, rather than having her complete her 2-week notice, decided that it wouldn't be necessary, so she could leave that very day. Somebody tell me how the heck she thought it was a good idea to sign a formal resignation letter after blackmailing the VP for a raise. He totally saw her as a threat to his job and eliminated her. Not only was Angela sleazy and lazy, but she seemed so gullible and kind of foolish. Next story. This happened to me about 20 years ago while I was in college. I got a job basically office sitting on weekends. I showed up at 8 in the morning, and every hour I checked over things, handled the occasional phone call, and then left when the 4 o'clock person arrived. Most of the time I would read, watch TV, or play games on my laptop. I probably worked no more than 10 minutes of every hour unless something went wrong. It went on like this for years. The pay was decent, holidays were double pay, and I even had opportunities to cover weekday shifts when others were sick. One day while I was covering the midday shift, my boss asked me to come into his office. He told me that the evening weekday position was going to become available that night. He offered me the position, which I accepted. I was told to punch out and return at 5 in the evening that night. The reason it went down like this should be obvious. Things went okay for a while. I showed up at 4 in the afternoon, did the normal things, and then left at midnight when my relief arrived. It was a little more work, there were many more calls at night. Then, after 9 months, things started to go south. The daytime person developed a huge attitude problem and went from a nice person to a total complainer. She would complain about everything I did. For example, one time, a system jammed up at a remote site, and she called them. 5 hours later, I saw that the jam was still there, so I called that site again to see if they were still working on it or if something else was wrong. I wanted to help solve this problem right away because the woman on our end who would be the one to help them was leaving soon. They did have a problem, so I connected them. My reward for making sure the problem got solved and not having to bother an upper-level employee at home on a Friday was that I got yelled at because the complainer said I had apparently ignored her log entry about the issue. My defense was ignored. The boss had me highlight important things on the log to verify that I read them. Things plodded on for a while with this new normal. I tiptoed around the complainer when needed, thankful for the fact that I only had to deal with her for no more than 5 minutes. I did this silly highlighting thing, and my log entries started getting more and more detailed, even referencing the complainer's calls when I had to follow up on an issue that crossed shifts. The following summer, just after I crossed the 1-year mark, I went on vacation to visit some friends out of state. When I got back after about a week, my boss came down after everyone had left and had me describe how I did a certain task which involved certain updates. I explained to him how I did it and so forth. He then told me that I had not been doing it at all and that he was firing me. I had transposed the date code of the English file for the French file, which was the previous one. The newest one had already been applied anyway, so nothing was wrong. It was just a reason to get rid of me. So I left the office. My state is an at-will employment state, which means that I can quit at any time for any reason, and my employer can terminate me at any time for any reason. The only exceptions were state and federal laws, such as race, religion, etc., and I thought I was out of luck, so I just began applying everywhere I could. During my job search, I happened to accidentally stumble upon a link about employment law. Out of curiosity, I read it and discovered that my employer had made a mistake. In the employee handbook, there was a job security clause. What this stated was that they would never lay us off, and if our jobs were eliminated, we would simply be retrained and sent to fill an opening elsewhere in the company. It sounded good, but it resulted in them cooking up reasons to fire people to get around it. However, their fancy, high-priced lawyers had missed something. In my state's laws, the ones passed by the legislature, I was out of luck because of at-will. What they neglected was case law, the ones determined by the courts. The website cited a case that had ruled that a job security clause had waived at will on the employer side, thus turning it into a just cause relationship. This meant that they had to have a real reason to fire me, which they didn't. With that in hand, I sought out a lawyer. After my consultation with her, I set about collecting my evidence. My former boss did not realize that I knew more about this program than he did, seeing as I ran the same software on my own computer and laptop. I experimented with the date of the file which they tried to use against me. It is baked into the version 2. I was able to demonstrate to my lawyer that if I applied the same update over and over, which my former employer stated would change the date every day, it would, in reality, display the date of the file. I showed this by backdating my own copy by a year using the update archive available from the vendor. Next, I showed her how the task used to be automated. A script would snag the file and process it every day on its own. A change on the vendor site broke the script. It was an easy fix, but no one had bothered to do it because the guy who wrote it had retired. The fix involved deleting 3 characters on one line in the script. The task was also marked as only being a weekday task. In my firing, I was told how important this update was and so forth. If it was so important, why was it not done on weekends or holidays? The vendor pushed out updates on these days too, as I showed my lawyer the one from Christmas morning. Why had the automation not been fixed? With all that in hand, she contacted them. After presenting them with the law they broke and the evidence I collected, they were forced to settle with me. So, in the end, their fancy, high-priced lawyers did not do their homework. I did, thanks to the wonderful librarians I've known in my life who taught me my information literacy skills. They paid dividends in this case. Obviously, the terms of the settlement are confidential. It was a good portion of my salary, though, and I did also get unemployment during this time as well. I never found out how the reaction went down, as the main office that would have dealt with it was in another state, and I never had any contact with those people. The complainer's fate was sealed about a year later. I saw a Facebook post by a former Kio worker mentioning that his job with them had ended, so I asked for details. The company experienced a huge loss in revenue, and as a result, the complainer lost her job as the site I worked in was closed. Of about 50 of us that worked in that office, only 10 or so were moved to another location. If I was 20 years old and was fired, I don't think I would have had the guts to hire a lawyer and go at them like our poster did. So bravo, sir! I would have just cut my losses. The only thing I found a little suspect about this story is how our poster mentioned that this happened over 20 years ago and then mentioned something about a Facebook status. Next story. My mom had a fairly consistent habit of gossiping and sharing quite personal information around. We knew she was doing it, but she would adamantly deny having ever done such a thing. I wish I could remember what she did that finally made me snap. It can't even be that important. It was just the millionth time, and for once, I wanted her to admit what she'd done and know that we knew too. So we set up the sting. My friend Jane and I approached my mom and told her that Jane was pregnant and that Jane wasn't ready to tell her mom yet. We told my mom that she was really worried about what people would think about her having a baby so young. She did not want anybody to know yet, so it had to be top secret. Having set the trap, I figured within a few weeks or so, I would have some evidence we could use, but I was so wrong. The very next day, my sister, grandma, and neighbor all asked me how my young, pregnant friend was doing. When I was asked by the lady who worked at the supermarket the same day, I figured this had gone far enough and went home to confront my mom, only to have my dad ask how Jane was doing. I confronted my mom right there in front of my dad, which is when she started with the usual "I would never do that, they must have heard it from someone else" routine. I explained very shortly and clearly that we had fed her a lie to see how far it would spread, and the reaction was glorious. My mom's mouth fell open, and she had nothing to say at all. My dad, on the other hand, fell back on the sofa, roaring with laughter, bemoaning the fact that he hadn't thought of this years ago. It was a moment I'll treasure forever, and the point was thoroughly made. Now that my mom was aware of what happened, I was able to satisfy all further inquiries about my friend's health with the true story, and my mom's audience for any further gossip was somewhat reduced. Next story. Years ago, I ended up doing some work for a guy I'll call Rick. It was just a side job for extra money. Rick had a small business, which was pretty dull, so I won't bore you with the details. Before me, he had one other employee, so I made it just two employees. That's how small the business was. The problem was that Rick ran his business terribly. I didn't know the specifics of his financial situation, but based on where he lived, the car he drove, and so on, he seemed to be doing pretty well. Maybe it was an inheritance or something else, I didn't know. But his lifestyle clearly wasn't due to this business, which again, he didn't run very well. In fact, he ran the business so poorly that about 6 months after I started working for him, it stopped making money. Instead of the regular payments we were used to, the other employee and I had to start asking where our money was before it showed up. Then the payments started getting more and more delayed. Eventually, I was owed around $100. One day, the other employee told me, "I'm done. He owes me like $5,000 and I'm not going to keep working for nothing." I was shocked because I had no idea he was owed so much. The trouble with pay clearly went back further than I realized. Rick ended up coming to me and said, "Look, I owe the other guy money and I need to pay him. Do you mind if I get him all paid up, which means I have to hold off on your pay for a month or two? But once he's paid off, I swear I'll make it all up to you." Because I'm a bit naive and felt bad for the first employee, who was a good guy, I said, "Fine, go ahead." So I didn't get paid at all for a while, which increased the total he owed me to about $1,500. Eventually I heard from the other employee, who told me that Rick finally paid him everything. Great, I thought, now it's my turn. A few weeks after I heard the other employee was paid up, Rick told me he was closing the business. I said, "Okay, so where's my money? When do I get paid?" I told him exactly how much he owed me, and all I got back was, "Well, the thing is, I can't pay you now." This went on for a year. I looked into my legal options, but I'd have to file something in small claims court. Since it was only about $1,500, hiring a lawyer would probably eat up most of it. So I just kept bugging Rick about the money. I even said, "Hey, just pay me $25 a month. I don't care." But he wouldn't even do that. He told me about how he was going through all his stuff to dissolve the business and that he'd pay me as soon as he could. Overall, he just avoided taking any responsibility. At one point, he mentioned that people were suing him and offered to get me in contact with his lawyers so my debt could be added on or something. I said, "Fine, give me their names and numbers." He never did. Eventually, I realized that nothing was ever going to come of this, and I was just going to be out of the money I was owed. But while I'd been working for him, I had emailed back and forth with his wife maybe a dozen times. To this day, I've never met her or even spoken with her, just communicated through email and text. She seemed really nice, and once told me something like, "Rick won't tell you this, but he really doesn't know what he's doing with the business, and I know you've been a big help." So I got the idea that the next email I sent to Rick about trying to get my money, I'd include his wife on it too so she'd know how much he was dropping the ball. I heard back from her almost right away. She wrote, "I'm so sorry about this. Please keep me posted on what happens." Then suddenly, like magic, Rick started talking about working on a payment schedule. He began sending me $100 every month, and the debt got down to $1,000. I figured his wife must have lit a fire under him, and I laughed to myself about how much influence she had. But then the money stopped coming again, and the excuses started. One day he told me he was going through a hard time financially, which I knew wasn't true. He still had a nice car, a nice house, and so on. But it's not like I had printouts of his bank records to call him out. On the exact same day he told me that, though, I was watching a local pro baseball game. And who did I see? Rick in great seats, no less, second row, right down in front, just off to the right. Every time they zoomed in on a right-handed batter, you could clearly see him. This was in September, during the playoff race. So I knew those tickets weren't cheap. It wasn't a courtroom drama moment, but the thought of replying to his "I'm having financial trouble" email with a picture of him in those seats gave me a huge sense of justice. I started looking for a good image to use, but every time I paused the video, his face was somewhat out of focus. It was clearly him if you watched the video, but I needed a still image that was unmistakably him. Then, in the seventh inning, a foul ball was caught 2 rows behind him, and the camera zoomed in. There was Rick, as clear as day, sitting with his wife. I thought, aha, I got you now. The next morning, I replied to his prior message by sending that screen capture of him. I figured even if I didn't get my money, I'd have one sweet moment of satisfaction by catching him in the act. I decided to send it to his wife too, so she'd know what was going on and that the money had stopped again. I remembered how quickly Rick's tune changed the first time I included her. I even thought that her being in the picture might make her push him even harder this time. So I sent the picture but didn't hear anything back from either of them. 2 or 3 days went by, and nothing. Then I heard from the other employee I worked with. He said, "You hear about Rick?" I replied, "No, what?" He said his wife kicked him out and filed for divorce. I was like, "No way!" Apparently she caught him cheating on her. I thought, I wonder how. Then it hit me, what if that wasn't his wife in the picture, and I sent her that picture? I figured he was probably talking about the divorce when he mentioned having financial trouble, and the divorce was already in the works before the picture. There's no way my sending that picture had anything to do with his divorce. But nope, that's literally what happened. The woman at the game with him wasn't his wife. Apparently, his wife knew the woman and realized that Rick had lied about where he was that night and who he was with. A storm of epic proportions quickly followed. I ended up emailing his wife not long after, saying, "Hello there. I've been hearing some things and I can't help thinking that the picture I sent might have been a part of this." She replied that she'd been meaning to contact me and thanked me. She paid me the $1,000 he owed me, plus another $500 on top. I don't know if she thought he still owed me $1,500 or if she purposely gave me the extra. It turned out that his nice car, house and all that, it was really his wife's. She was the one with all the money, meaning he no longer has it. They got divorced, he moved away, and I have no idea what became of him. Honestly, considering everything that's happened, I kind of feel bad for him. But then I remember there's no reason he couldn't have just paid me. Seriously, why not just pay? He had the money. I just chalk it up to Rick having a lot of negative karma coming his way, and I played a part in it catching up with him. This has to be one of the greatest unintentional revenges I've ever read. Not only can he not run a business properly, but he can't even cheat properly. Come on, man, why are you taking that woman to a major sporting event? I would have loved to see the look on his face if a kiss cam caught him that night. Next story. I'm in the army and I was married. I was approaching my first deployment to Iraq. It was very stressful, and it had my wife wanting me to find a way to stay and not deploy. Obvious things any wife would try to talk about. Anyway, we had no kids, but both wanted them. So, we talked about getting out of debt while I was gone. She spoke to her best friend back home in another state, where we're both from. Her friend agreed to let her move in and charge a modest $300 in rent so we could get out of debt and start a family when I came back. A plan I was actually very pleased with. I deployed, and she was there, crying her eyes out, saying she'd miss me, that she loved me, and that we'd start a family when I got back. The usual husband leaving, wife on deployment stuff. Fast forward 2 months, and she started acting distant, not wanting to talk much on her scheduled calls or texting back with 1- or 2-word answers. We'd been together 6 years, and she was never at a loss for words. One day she said, "I need some space." She asked someone who was 10,000 miles away for space because she wanted to find herself. I remembered back when we lived at home, there was a guy who was always being borderline inappropriate. I'm not a very jealous person, and I trusted her, but I started seeing this guy in basically all the pictures she posted with a group. Every time he was in the picture, everyone else changed, but never him. For the first time, I was very jealous and uneasy about everything. So, I cloned her phone using T-Mobile's Digit service so that I received every text she sent and received. I'll never forget the first text I saw after cloning her phone. It said, "Hey babe, I'll see you after work. Want me to save you any of my food?" That was from her to him, and it destroyed me. I didn't eat or sleep. I stared at the phone, watching every conversation, watching them talk about trying to have a baby. It was literally everything a married person fears. I asked her if she was seeing someone, and she said no, she was taking care of herself and she loved me, blah blah blah. I didn't say anything about receiving her texts for 2 months. Then she finally admitted to cheating. During this time she paid off our debt, got tattoos with him, matching I love you tattoos, went to shows with him, and bought clothes with the money I was making. So this is where the revenge starts. I put a freeze on our account for a month and changed every password to every account to things she wouldn't guess. I blocked her on Facebook and my phone so she had no way to contact me. She lost her car to repossession a few months later, got kicked out of her place, and had to sell her prized shoes and purses just to stay afloat. I found out she got a job at her old restaurant, where she worked with him. I had friends call and complain about both of them constantly. They worked at a restaurant, so I also had friends dine and dash, and they both got fired. She then tried to call my command, telling them I was abandoning her and that she couldn't provide for herself. My commander knew what was going on and did nothing. About a month before I came back, she called me from another number to tell me she was pregnant with his kid. Mind you, I was still gone, so we couldn't get divorced yet. She then moved 10 hours away with him. On April 24, 2018, she called me, 5 months pregnant, crying uncontrollably, asking where she should go. Apparently, they had a giant blow-up fight, and she told him she was leaving. She said she didn't know where to go, and I simply said, "Sorry, not my problem anymore." Fast forward to January this year, she called me from a mutual friend's phone, saying, "He hit me. I don't know what to do." I replied, "Maybe don't cheat on your husband when he's deployed for some guy who talks a big game." She asked if I was happy about this, and I said no, but I'm glad I'm not the bad guy in the story. The next month, she told me he was cheating on her with 2 other girls and that she was so sorry she messed things up. These stories really struck a chord with me, and I'd like to share my views. The story about Angela at the tech corporation is infuriating. Her blatant laziness, like painting toenails on the job and harassing Kate after being reported, is despicable. I admire Kate's friend for exposing Angela's affair to her fiancé, leading to her resignation. That's your replaceable moment? Pure justice. HR's inaction frustrates me. Workplace bullying needs consequences. The office-sitting job tale hits hard. I've been in roles where small mistakes get weaponized. The OP's legal savvy in leveraging the employee handbook's job security clause was brilliant. Proving the firing was baseless with technical evidence? Masterful. I love how the complainer's job ended with the office closure, karma's patient. The gossiping mom story is hilarious. I'd have loved to see her face drop when caught in the sting. Spreading fake pregnancy news in a day? Wild. I respect the OP's clever setup. It's a lighthearted way to teach accountability without malice. Rick's story is a lesson in persistence. I'd have given up on that $1,500, but the OP's email to Rick's wife was a game changer. Unintentionally sparking a divorce by catching him cheating at a baseball game? Iconic. I feel a twinge for Rick, but dodging payment was his choice. Wife's payout was sweet. The Army deployment betrayal cuts deep. Cheating while a spouse is risking their life? Unforgivable. Cloning the phone was a bold move I'd have confronted sooner, but the OP's financial freeze and restaurant sabotage were cathartic. Her downfall, losing her car, job, and relationship, feels like deserved consequences. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our ProRevenge episode. If you missed the last episode of ProRevenge, I'll link it right here. Go check it out, and I'll see you in the next one!